that to me looks like a chakra when they talk about chakras, which, is its own discussion anyway, to get into that. But because what we think we've been taught about chakras are actually kind of different historically. But as far as how energy flowing and meeting what I would call an intersection point in the body, this is a really beautiful example of it. So for me, just to kind of break this down to people on a physical level, if we're looking at something like this, let's say the top of it is the top of your shoulder. And that's where you feel like a nagging pain. And the one on the left, the cone on the left, is the front of your pec that feels really uncomfortable. And the one at the back is that nagging pain in your shoulder. And then the one below that is going down and communicating with the organ underneath, whether it be stomach or spleen on the left side or liver, gallbladder on the right. And the point that we are focused on using the top of the body where the cones meet the red part and thinking that they're not actually connected all together. But if you actually can understand that there's an interior point that's actually holding the core of where tension is, and you think or work on the shoulder, at the top of the shoulder or the front of the pec or the back of the shoulder blade as a bodywork therapist, or even in stretching yourself, and you keep your mind in where the center is, because your mind can locate the center, the whole nervous system releases in a whole different way. And that's what I've seen in 30 years of working on bodies, and 20 years of being taught this geometric understanding to the body. So I love this shape because it illustrates really perfectly for me how geometry and the body and tensions and how we can release them are all connected. Did I make that? Was that clear? Did that make
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks. I really appreciate that. Yeah, that's the only reason I came up with this shape is, yes, I think it was a chakra too, a chakra when I was making it, and had a visualization after making it and holding it. Like that's my first impression of it, and the only reason I got to it is because of the truncated octahedron, right? Because this is a truncated octahedron. This is a spherical truncated octahedron. These
right?
cones that you see here, these 6 cones, there's 4 in this one on the right. There's 6 in here because you have one in facing, facing you and one going inwards, right? So you have 6
Yeah.
points meeting in the middle.
Yeah.
Well, these are those hexagon faces and those are those square faces that are holding it. That's why I say that those forms are just the container for how the energy moves through the container.
Yeah.
And I made it spherical like this so you can kind of get a window inside the solid structure, right? This would be no different than this giant form that I made here. If you took away all the big hexagon shaped pyramids,
Mm-hmm.
right, and you just were left with these 6 little square ones, right, has the same shape, which is the same shape that this whole thing is part of, right? Except it's focused on the square faces, right? And this is a really, I think, important thing that I think to discuss is, I know the orientation of the hexagon plane with the hexagons facing up, but in the same truncated octahedron, you can have the orientation like this with the square faces up, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that makes a bit of a distinction in how the rest of the geometry is going to line up. And this slide here kind of shows that, right? So if you have octahedron, right? So the octahedron, remember, is the this little guy here. Like if that's oriented up, right, and you truncate that, well, then you're left with square faces facing up and down, and that's what this is right here. That's square faces up and down. The hexagon faces are off to the left and right. Now, if that is the up, and I don't know if up and down actually matter, but this is something I'm always studying and thinking about a lot in terms of the relationship with the geometry, is which way is north or up, right? Which way is up?
Right. So
And
the way that I would relate that in the body, for instance, in the way that I even learned that there were planes of energy inside the body that I was tracking, is that even though we just looked at that thing with, it had the 4 directions on it basically, and I described how you could have the pec in the front and the shoulder at the
yeah,
back and what have you. Yeah. There are a million different angles all within that. So when I'm teaching somebody how to work on a body, to find these inside connection points where the core of the tension really builds in the body. And like fabric, if you put your hand in the middle of that and you started to twist, it would pull on all the four areas. But there's not just four areas, there's all of these other geometries and angles involved. So when you're working on oneself, you can just think about the core energy. That's easier. Even when you're working on a body as a therapist, if you are touching a point, there is a particular angle you need to feel, and then it's like it locks into place in the center. And it's never, it's very similar angles, but if I had the mind, and I do not, to be able to map out, like, I think if your mind and my mind got melded together and worked on a body, there would be an amazing ability to actually map out the variety of different angles involved to get down to the center. But ultimately, they're limitless, right? Because just like a ray of sun, there's not just one ray, it creates rays all around it. So this is like a very simplified, direct version way of describing how tension actually starts in the center, and we think it's on the surface. And yet the practicality of working hands-on to get into it, this is a good place to start. And yet it can also include any angle, and then it has to be a sensory experience in order for you to really feel the lock-in, and therefore the tension release that you can create through the nervous system.
Okay, yeah, I got you. That's it's a lot more complex because remember, you're moving to something organic and you're moving to something that is just a straight
Yeah.
line linear geometry that is like, once again, it's always like it's just like a roadmap pointing in a particular direction. It's meant to unlock the educational opportunities to use these as, you know, teaching devices to help us shift our awareness or viewpoint of things. It's
Well
always
said.
pointing in that direction, and very truthfully pointing about it because it these things are elemental to all the elements and relationships at all these different levels, right?
Yeah.
From the physical to non-physical relationships. So it's good that we're able to kind of have these types of structures to stimulate the way to see deeper into things than we typically could, or have an insight and manifest it, that becomes a tool that helps us see something we couldn't articulate otherwise very easily.
Yeah, and I
So
just saw something I haven't seen before as you were saying that, looking at this thing, that's the Templar cross, which is very, very predominant in a lot of physics and different things of that nature. And so I see the Templar cross perfectly in that. That's why I think I really love this shape so much, but I just saw a new version as to why. And of course, once we have, just to riff on the thought that you were just saying, once we have the 3D version of something like my shape, we lose the idea that it's actually a living organism. It's showing movement and action, but you're freezing it for a moment in order to catch the concepts that are actually expressing themselves and speaking to you, speaking to one without words through the use of symbols. And it's like the greatest teacher.
yeah, yeah. I mean, as you know, I've gone deep into learning from this directly, pretty much from what you see here and the trails that I followed through discovery of what is unveiled in the 2D shapes, and realizing that yes, they can be 2D, they can be 3D, and they're also higher dimensional geometry there. It really stretches the mind's capacity to hold all that at once, right? And
Yeah.
also be able to move between any one of those and kind of be hanging out at that plane with the forms looking at them through that lens, and then entirely shift, right? It's like recently I did a video on Metatron's cube and the design, just the line drawing of it, and showed that could be completely constructed out of these pyramids. I don't have a slide of that right here, but out of these square pyramids, the same line pattern can be completely constructed out of pyramids. So when we're looking at something for so long, that's a cube, that's a cube, that's a cube, you know, containing these things, then you can look at the whole line structure completely different. Tetrahedron edges become edges to pyramids. Then it's like, oh, there's so much more potential in this than I realized, right? And it's not the potential in that, it's the potential in me. You know, it's potential in us. That is not the potential that's just there. It's both. It's like that's a mirror of our potential. You know, the more you look into that, it's really mirroring back. It's not, you know, what our true potential is. of how many ways of expansive creative ideas that can be drawn from that. So that's really exciting to me. And I think it's a great area for geometers to get together and discuss the different ways they see things, or body workers, like they always get together, discuss and describe how they are looking at these same shapes from different angles. And you're not locked, if you're doing geometry the way I do it, you're not locked in any one particular view, but you learn a lot from everybody's perspective. So when I go back to those diagrams, I get so much more enrichment out of it because I learned that other way of seeing, you know?
Yeah, and if that's not a life lesson on how to function on this planet, I don't know what is.
Well, that's why this is a mirror to that opportunity to continue to expand our consciousness and relationships, not only just through discovering these cool little things, to being a different person on the earth, but
Lekandarayandeeka, lekandarayan kiratakarayan, lekandarayandeeka, lekiraye, lekaye, lekiraye. Lekandarayandeeka, lekandarayan kiratakarayan, lekandarayan.